She had not planned to keep the cat. This was important context. Vera Szymanski had not planned to keep the cat because the cat had arrived via her neighbor's moving truck, and the neighbor had returned without the cat, and Vera had found him sitting in the hallway outside her apartment door at 11 p.m. on a rainy October Tuesday, and had taken him inside because the alternative was unacceptable, not because she had intended to become a cat owner. His name was Theorem. She had named him this after 2 weeks, when it became clear he was staying, because he seemed to approach every problem: new furniture, new food, the placement of the laundry basket, as if it were a logical proof he needed to work through to its conclusion. He was an 8-pound silver tabby with an evaluative quality to his gaze that Vera, who was a mathematics professor, found professionally compatible. Her daughter Nia was born 6 weeks early. Not dramatically early. 34 weeks, which is early enough to matter and late enough to have good outcomes, which the NICU attending had explained carefully, and which Vera had processed the way she processed all information, systematically looking for the variables that were still open. The primary variable at 34 weeks is respiratory maturity. Preterm lungs work. They work less efficiently. The protocol for a 34-weeker is monitoring, bring her home, watch her breathe. Know what to watch for. Vera knew what to watch for. She had the discharge packet. She had the list of symptoms. She had the pulse oximeter that the pediatrician had recommended for preterm home monitoring. She had not expected Theorem. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. On the third night home, Theorem sat on the changing table beside the bassinet and watched Nia breathe. This was unusual. He had investigated the nursery thoroughly upon their return. The bassinet, the changing table, every piece of new equipment, and had, after this investigation, returned to his established territories. His watching was not anxious. It was the watching of a cat who had found something that required sustained attention. By 3 a.m., he was making a sound. Not a distressed vocalization, a sustained, low rhythmic sound that Vera would later describe as something between purring and an alarm. She woke because it was not a sound she had heard from him before. And unfamiliar sounds in the middle of the night with a premature infant in the house constitute an input that her nervous system had apparently decided to flag, regardless of sleep state. She checked the pulse oximeter. Nia's saturation was 89%. The alarm threshold was 90%. She called 911. The emergency department attending explained respiratory pauses in preterm infants with the precision and care of a doctor who has had this conversation many times and who understood that the parents hearing it for the first time needed both the clinical reality and the reason not to spiral. He said, "Apnea of prematurity is a normal physiological feature of a preterm nervous system." He said, "The brainstem's respiratory regulation center matures over the final weeks of gestation. At 34 weeks, some infants experience brief pauses in breathing that self-resolve." He said, "Brief is the clinical word for under 20 seconds. What happened tonight was longer than brief." He said, "You caught it in time." He said, "The oximeter alarmed?" Vera said, "The cat alarmed first." He looked at her for a moment. He said, "Cats have exceptional sensitivity to changes in respiratory rhythm. They detect the subtle sound and movement differences that precede apnea events in ways that electronic monitors sometimes miss, because monitors alarm on outcome, not precursor." He said, "Some neonatal ICUs have documented cases of family cats responding to apnea precursors before monitoring equipment." He said, "Keep the cat. Has your dog or cat ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard." Theorem was in his position on the changing table beside the bassinet when Vera came home from the hospital. He had, apparently, not moved significantly. Her neighbor who had come to feed him confirmed this. He was watching the empty bassinet. When Naya came home 3 days later, after the monitoring adjustment and the caffeine treatment and the 2 apnea-free days that were the discharge criteria, Theorem was in position before the car seat was through the door. He stayed in position for 6 weeks, every night on the changing table beside the bassinet, his specific low sound present when something required it, absent when everything was fine. The pulse oximeter alarmed twice more. Both times, Theorem had made his sound first. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Nia is 14 months old. She is at weight and developmental milestone for corrected gestational age and has, as of the last appointment, no residual respiratory concerns. Theorem remains in the apartment. He is no longer on the changing table beside the bassinet. The bassinet has been retired and Naya is in a crib in the nursery and Theorem sleeps on the floor beside it, which is a location he identified himself. Vera did not plan to keep the cat. She cannot now imagine having done otherwise. Tomorrow, a story about a dog who noticed something wrong in the water bowl and what it turned out to mean about the pipes in the house.